Welcome, and thank you for joining us on this custom-tailored deep dive. We have a stack of sources today that are going to completely hijack your imagination. So I want to hook you immediately with a premise that has been entirely occupying my mind since we started prepping for this. Think about every fantasy story you've ever been told. What if magic, as we understand it, wizards waving wands, mystical incantations, spells, what if that simply isn't real? But what if ancient, sound-based physics is? What if the monsters of our oldest, most foundational myths were actually genetically engineered hybrids, and the angel who originally created those hybrids left their master blueprints buried in the red dirt on the surface of Mars?
Yeah, it forces you to completely rethink the framework of human history, mythology, theology all at once. When you read through the source material, you realize very quickly that you aren't just looking at a standard sci-fi or fantasy premise. You are looking at, well, an alternate historical thesis.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the factual, canonical source material of the Cydonia Oaths. This is Book 1 of the Nephilim Chronicles by Kerman Gild. And I just want to clarify up front, this isn't just a Monster of the Week story. It is a wildly ambitious biblical apocalyptic thriller. It weaves ancient, sacred texts. We're talking about First Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, the Dead Sea, goes right into a highly sophisticated, modern tactical war. And for those of you who love a sprawling timeline, this is a meticulously researched chronological epic. It literally begins at 3504 BCE with the descent of the Watchers, the fallen angels, and stretches all the way into the modern day, leading right up to the prophesied tribulation.
To really set the stage for you, we have to look at how every myth you think you know is treated in this universe. Greek gods, Sumerian legends, ancient folklore, they're all treated as corrupted, telephone game memories of actual historical and deeply physical events. The author strips away the fairy tale aspect entirely and grounds the supernatural in hard, terrifying physics.
Which brings us to the most distinctive element of the entire series. And honestly, the thing I am absolutely obsessed with, the complete rejection of traditional magic. There's no spellcasting here. No one is wiggling their fingers to make a fireball. It is all based on what the lore calls the acoustic paradigm. It's ancient sound-based engineering.
The theological and physical basis for this acoustic paradigm is genuinely brilliant. If you look at the creation narrative in Genesis 1, God doesn't wave a hand to build the universe. He speaks it into existence. Let there be light. In this lore, creation is fundamentally an acoustic event. It's about vibration and frequency. The 200 Watchers, these celestial beings who eventually fall to Earth, originally witnessed this. They heard the creation harmonic. They understood the math of the music, so to speak.
But when they descended to Mount Hermon to rebel, they lost something crucial, right? The text talks about their manon.
Yes, exactly. The manon is their celestial habitation, their divine bodies. By shedding that man to interact physically with the human world, they became stranded. They lost the inherent natural power to manipulate reality through their own spiritual will. Suddenly, they are bound by the physical laws of the universe just like you and me. So to compensate for this massive loss of power, they had to build technology. They had to construct physical machines to replicate the frequencies of creation they could no longer naturally produce.
So they essentially had to invent hardware to do what their spiritual software used to do natively. It's like, I don't know, a programmer losing access to the cloud and having to build a supercomputer from scratch in their garage. And that leads us to one of the most mind-bending parts of this deep dive, the Mars discovery. How do we get from fallen angels on Mount Hermon to infrastructure on the Red Planet?
It comes down to the Nephilim Wars. The Nephilim were the monstrous hybrid children of the Watchers and human women. When they began slaughtering each other and destroying the Earth, a divine decree was issued for their total destruction, what we know as the Flood. To escape this, a specific, highly advanced faction of the Nephilim called the Oracle Clan realized they couldn't survive on Earth. They possessed gateway technology and understanding of planar physics that allowed them to literally flee to Mars.
And on Mars, they built the Cydonia complex. For anyone listening who has ever gone down the 1990s internet rabbit hole of the famous face on Mars or the D&M pyramid anomaly, well, Kerman Gild takes that real-world conspiracy theory and hardwires it into his lore. In this universe, that is Watcher infrastructure. And surrounding that massive face on the Martian plain, they erected 20 monolithic obsidian steels.
And this is exactly where the ancient timeline violently collides with the modern day. We are introduced to a character named Brennan McNeve. He runs a 21st century aerospace company, and his Titan rovers are exploring the Cydonian plain. They discover these 20 steels. But when Brennan retrieves and analyzes the material, the Cydonian ore, he realizes it violates known crystallographic axioms.
Let's pause and explain that for the listener, because the science here is dense but so cool. What does it actually mean that it violates crystallographic axioms?
Essentially, the atomic structure of a crystal dictates how it behaves, how it refracts light, how it holds heat. Brennan looks at the molecular lattice of this Cydonia ore and realizes it's not naturally occurring stone. It has been engineered at the atomic level to act as an acoustic memory substrate. It's a 5,000-year-old hard drive, but instead of storing data in binary code, it stores data in frequency and vibration.
Which means the stone literally has memory. And the 20 Watcher Chiefs beings you've probably heard of in obscure mythologies like Shemiyaza, Eraquil, Kokabel, and Barakiller, they carve their oaths of rebellion into these steels. Because the stone is an acoustic metamaterial, it didn't just record the shape of their words. It recorded the exact sound and frequency of their voices speaking those oaths 5 millennia ago.
What's fascinating here is the sheer destructive power of those recorded voices. When Brennan brings this material into his lab and attempts to scan it, he accidentally activates one of the steels. This triggers what the source material calls an anti-singularity event.
Oh, that scene in the lab is pure creeping terror. The steels on Mars start broadcasting the actual voices of these fallen angels. And because they are operating on the baseline frequency of creation, the broadcast transmits across 40 million miles of space instantaneously. It completely bypasses the speed of light.
Right, the physics behind the anti-singularity event is terrifying. That acoustic memory replay triggers a localized entropy acceleration in Brennan's lab. The Watcher's oaths were essentially the acoustic inverse of creation. God spoke things into order. The Watchers spoke their rebellion, which is the frequency of disorder. By playing that frequency back, reality in the lab literally begins to unmake itself. The molecules start tearing apart.
It takes the idea of words having power to an apocalyptic level. But this concept of stone having memory isn't just restricted to Mars. We see this acoustic metamaterial right here on Earth, too.
We do. Cydonia ore was also recovered from Mount Hermon on Earth, which, if you remember, is the exact site where the Watchers originally descended and tore through the planar boundary to interact with humanity. Because of its proximity to that celestial breach, that specific ore perfectly records and hums with the 7.83 Hertz Schumann resonance.
Now, you've probably heard of the Schumann resonance if you're into atmospheric science. In the real world, it's the electromagnetic heartbeat of the Earth, created by lightning strikes bouncing between the surface and the ionosphere. But how does the author use it here?
Kerman Gild elevates that real-world science. In the lore, that 7.83 Hertz isn't just lightning static, it is the pure, uncorrupted baseline frequency of divine creation itself. And the Cydonian ore from Mount Hermon is locked into that harmonic. It vibrates with the perfect, unfallen music of the universe.
And that leads us directly to the man who carries a weapon made of that very stone. Let's talk about the protagonist who carries this entire 2,600-year burden, Cian Morna. I find this character absolutely fascinating. He isn't a superhero. He's the ultimate battle-fatigued military veteran.
His timeline alone is exhausting to consider. Cian was born roughly 611 BCE in Ireland. He was a warrior known as the Knight of the Red Branch. But his life radically changed in 586 BCE when he was officially commissioned into this endless war by the biblical prophet Jeremiah himself.
Let's look at the biological math of his existence, because you can't understand Cian without understanding the curse of his longevity. He isn't immortal in the sense that he can't be killed, but his aging process is brutally stretched out.
Cian ages at a rate of 1 biological year for every 1,000 chronological years. So in the modern day, the 2020s, he is chronologically 2,636 years old, but biologically, he has the physical appearance, the cellular regeneration, and the vitality of a 28 to 30-year-old man.
Imagine the psychological weight of that. You are stuck in your physical prime while entire empires rise and fall around you.
It is a crushing reality. Over 2,600 years, he has married and loved 4 different women. He has had to watch every single one of them grow old, wither, and die, while he remains completely unchanged in the mirror. It has been 850 years since his last wife, Cian, passed away. The source notes describe his emotional state beautifully. It says he has built emotional walls that make the historic fortifications of Constantinople look like wooden garden fences. He has buried dozens of generations of his own descendants. He watches his great-great-great-grandchildren die of old age.
And while he's surviving all this grief, he's also fighting. Over his lifetime, the files indicate he has accumulated approximately 50,000 supernatural kills. 50,000! That's not a skirmish. That's an industrial-scale war waged by one man. But why him? He isn't just a random Irish warrior who got lucky. He is part of something called the Mishraite legacy.
If we connect this to the broader historical picture, Cian's lineage is deeply purposeful. When Jeremiah commissioned him, the prophet revealed that Cian is descended from Machir, the firstborn son of Manasseh. For those who know their biblical geography and history, the Machirites were renowned as the Giant Slayer clan. They were the specific Israelites who conquered the giant kingdoms of Bashan, including the infamous King Og, who was described as the last of the Rephilim.
So it's literally in his blood. His destiny is genetically and spiritually hardwired to hunting the Nephilim. He's the apex predator of a bloodline purpose-built to fight giants. But beyond the grand prophecy of his bloodline, his personal motivation is rooted in a highly specific, profound tragedy from his childhood.
When Cian was just 8 years old, his home was attacked. He was forced to hide in the walls and helplessly watch his house burn down. Worse, he watched his 5-year-old sister Niam get kidnapped by supernatural forces, specifically an entity known as Odhan the Usurper and a terrifying creature named Lord Varkolak.
You take an 8-year-old boy, force him to watch his family be destroyed by monsters, give him a genetic predisposition for giant killing, and then stretch his life out over 2 millennia. That helpless trauma forged him into an absolute weapon. He spent centuries trying to find his sister.
And that pursuit set him on the path to retrieve his greatest asset. This is, without a doubt, the most unique supporting character in the entire lore.
Yes. We have to talk about Chrá. This is Methuselah's sword. Honestly, it might be the greatest sidekick in modern fantasy literature.
The origin of this sword ties perfectly back to what we were just discussing with the acoustic paradigm. The patriarch Enoch, the scribe, who is famously described as a seventh from Adam, the man who walked with God and was taken up to heaven, gathered fragments of that specific Cydonia debris from Mount Hermon. He took this acoustic memory substrate and forged it into a blade.
The forging process itself is incredibly symbolic. The text says Enoch folded the metal 70 times 7 times. He was deliberately compressing the acoustic memory of the angel's fall into the atomic structure of the metal itself.
And because it's made of that acoustic metamaterial, the sword is entirely sentient. But it doesn't speak with a voice in Cian's head. It communicates through tonal patterns. It hums, it vibrates, it sings ancient combat songs when it anticipates a battle.
It has so much personality. There's this amazing detail in the notes where the sword literally snorts when it encounters modern scientific arrogance. Imagine Cian sitting in a 21st century lab trying to explain modern quantum physics to a 5,000-year-old piece of divine metal, and the sword just emits this dismissive, vibrating hum that perfectly translates to, "You humans are adorable, you have no idea how the universe works."
The relationship between Cian and the sword is fascinating. He actually named her Chrá, which means my torment in Irish, and he gave her that name during the Nika riots in Constantinople in 532 CE.
Which, just as a quick historical sidebar for you listening, the Nika riots were the most violent riots in the history of the Byzantine Empire, where half the city burned down over chariot racing factions. And there's Cian, right in the middle of the bloodiest historical conflicts, carrying a sentient sword.
They've been together for 2,600 years. It is the longest partnership in human history. But Chrá isn't just a companion. Her resonance is the specific mechanism that allows Cian to fight supernatural threats.
Right, because it's not about how sharp the edge is. When he draws Chrá, the blade emits that 7.83 hertz creation frequency. And that pure frequency is absolute poison to the Nephilim and the undead.
Exactly. The corrupted existence of a demon or a giant simply cannot maintain coherence in the presence of the pure, divine acoustic harmonic. The vibration literally shakes their supernatural biology apart.
As fascinating as a sentient 5,000-year-old frequency sword is, Cian can't exactly walk into a 21st century urban compound swinging a glowing blade without drawing massive attention. He can't just bring a sword to a tactical gunfight. How does he adapt this ancient acoustic physics into modern warfare?
This is where Kerman Gild's world-building really shines. Caden has spent millennia studying the anatomy and physics of how to kill these things. And rather than being a stubborn immortal stuck in the past, he has fully embraced 21st century military science to do his job efficiently. The juxtaposition is brilliant. He brings Tier 1 operator tactics to a supernatural war.
I love looking at his custom arsenal. The source material doesn't just say he used a magic gun. It details highly specialized gear. If he's dealing with a standard nest of vampires or ghouls, he isn't walking in with garlic and a wooden stake. He approaches it surgically.
For standard clearance, he uses specialized chemical and binary systems. The text mentions the Morta 7 binary system. This isn't magic dust. It's a weaponized chemical payload designed to exploit the specific biological vulnerabilities of ghouls. He also uses halogen rain and bone dry protocols.
And when it comes to ballistics, he's using a .50 BMG rifle for anti-vampire work. He deploys Tintreach rounds, which is the Irish word for lightning and cremator thermate rounds. He can surgically clear out an entire building of supernatural threats from a distance without ever having to engage them in hand-to-hand combat. It's highly efficient pest control.
But inevitably, he does have to engage in close-quarters combat against the Nephilim giants. And you cannot fight a 12-foot-tall genetic monstrosity wearing Kevlar. This is where he deploys the MTS-7 exoskeleton.
This suit is incredible. It comes in different variants: stealth, heavy combat, and Arctic, depending on the theater of war. It's a power assist armor that gives him the mechanical strength to go toe-to-toe with a giant. But the sheer physical strength isn't what keeps him alive. It's the surface treatment of the armor.
The armor plates are covered in micro-etched Enochian wards. Now, in a lesser story, those wards would just be glowing magic shields. But here, relying on the acoustic paradigm, those wards act as frequency anchors.
Let's break down how that actually looks in a fight. To a human eye, Cian just looks like a guy in a high-tech mech suit. But a demon, or a Nephilim, perceives reality differently. They see energy and frequency. The micro-etched wards completely scramble a supernatural entity's perception. So to them, Cian doesn't look solid. He looks like a violent visual smear of static.
It causes severe sensory disorientation. It induces the supernatural equivalent of profound motion sickness and vertigo. You survive a giant by wearing a suit that makes it impossible for the giant's brain to target you.
The tactical application of this physics goes even deeper when we look at his firearms. The text goes into incredible, meticulous detail regarding the science of Nephilim regeneration. If you blow off a giant's arm with a standard explosive, they don't just bleed out.
No, because they have what the lore calls a spiritual anchor. The Nephilim are hybrids, meaning they possess a fragment of their watcher-progenitor's soul. That spiritual anchor acts as a perfect, incorruptible template. Whenever their physical bodies take massive damage, the anchor instantly begins pulling matter together to reconstruct the flesh according to that template.
It's an automatic healing factor dictated by their fallen soul. So how do you stop a monster that instantly regains its health bar? You can't just shoot it. You have to shut off the spiritual Wi-Fi. And Cian engineers a piezoelectric solution to do exactly that.
The physics here are devastating. Cian fabricates a custom 12mm round. The core of this bullet is made of gay PO4, which is gallium phosphate.
For those listening who might not be familiar with piezoelectricity, it's a real scientific principle. It's the same science used in those clicky grill lighters or quartz watches. Certain crystals, when put under extreme physical pressure or mechanical stress, generate an electrical charge. Gallium phosphate is a highly effective piezoelectric crystal.
And Cian exploits that real-world science to the extreme. But here's the genius part. He hollows out the core of that crystal and seeds it with tiny metal filings. It is actual physical dust that he collected from his whetstone over centuries of sharpening Chrá.
He weaponizes the dust of a sentient sword. When he fires that 12mm round, it impacts the giant at roughly 900 meters per second. That sudden violent deceleration creates massive mechanical pressure on the gallium phosphate core. The piezoelectric effect instantly generates approximately 47,000 volts of electricity inside the target's body.
Now, 47,000 volts is a massive shock, but it might not permanently kill a being of that size. The lethality comes from the payload. Because the round is seeded with Cydonian ore dust carrying the 7.83 Hz creation frequency, that electrical discharge acts as a carrier wave for the frequency.
It acts as a violent reset switch. The voltage combined with the divine frequency short-circuits the monster's spiritual anchor. It completely severs the connection between the indestructible soul template and the physical flesh. Once that anchor is shorted out, the giant stops regenerating and dies like any biological creature.
It's phenomenal world building, grounding ancient, terrifying biblical monsters in a modern framework where a tactical operator is using high-velocity gallium phosphate rounds to essentially electrocute their souls.
It makes you wonder, if Cian is this well-equipped, why hasn't he won the war yet? You can shoot a giant, sure, but how do you shoot an overarching global economic system? And that leads us perfectly to the macro-level threat they are fighting, the global conspiracy known as the Harlot system.
To truly understand the scale of the Harlot system, we have to look back at the mechanics of the flood. As we mentioned, God sent the flood to destroy the Nephilim. The physical, biological bodies of these giants drowned. But because they were unnatural hybrids, part human, part angelic, their spirits were a cosmic anomaly. They were not received by the realm of the dead, Sheol, like human souls.
They became disembodied spirits. The ancient texts referred to them as the Shadim, or what we would colloquially call demons.
According to the specific lore pulled from the Book of Jubilees, God commanded the archangel Michael to bind these disembodied spirits in the abyss. However, the leader of the evil spirits pleaded for a fraction of them to remain, to test and tempt humanity. The decree was made that 90% of the Shadim were bound in the abyss, but 10% were allowed to roam the earth.
And what do those 10% do with thousands of years of free time? They build power. Over millennia, those roaming demons masqueraded as ancient figures of wisdom. The Sumerians called them the Apkallu, the fish sages who allegedly emerged from the sea to teach humanity civilization. Later, they masqueraded as the ancient gods of Greece and Rome. They demanded worship, sacrifices, and obedience.
And as human society evolved, so did they. They didn't stay in temples. They eventually evolved into the modern global elites. They traded their stone altars for corporate boardrooms and central banks. They built an organization known as the Synagogue of Satan.
It's described as a network of 13 houses. Think of it like a massive, shadowy multinational corporation. But the board of directors has been the exact same demonic entities since the Bronze Age. They control global finance, geopolitical movements, and the media. They are the overarching Mystery Babylon system spoken of in prophecy, deeply entrenched in human institutions, guiding history from the shadows to prepare for the ultimate return of their imprisoned brethren.
And the most fascinating part of this entire conspiracy is its architect. The CEO of this demonic corporation isn't a giant monster or a fallen angel. It is a human woman.
Yes. Let's introduce Nama, who the lore identifies as the Whore of Babylon. She has been alive for 5,000 years, and her origin story is wild.
Nama was born before the flood. She was the sister of Tubal-Cain, the biblical figure known for forging weapons. But her true power came when she became the consort to Shemiyaza, the supreme commander of the Watchers.
And she didn't just passively receive forbidden knowledge from him, she actively conquered him in a sense. She managed to extract Shemiyaza's true celestial name. In ancient occult traditions, knowing an entity's true name gives you absolute mastery over them. She leveraged that immense occult power to survive the flood.
She survived by transforming herself. She utilized the acoustic paradigm to mutate her own biology into a siren, or what ancient Mesopotamians called a lilitu. She became something suspended between human and demon, a creature that technically no longer dwelt upon the land, allowing her to exploit a loophole in the flood's judgment.
And for 5,000 years, she has been running the harlot system. She's been building financial empires, establishing corrupt bloodlines, and hiding her massive infrastructure in plain sight. Meanwhile, Cian has been running around the globe for 2,600 years, essentially pruning the lower branches of her organization, trying to disrupt her operations.
But Nama is just preparing the earth for the true heavy hitters. If we connect this to the bigger prophetic picture, the intelligence files we have on the Nephilim reveal a massive twist regarding the apocalyptic entities mentioned in the Book of Revelation. A major intelligence update from Cian's network confirms that Azazel and Ohia are not Watchers, as some ancient traditions mistakenly assumed. They are first-generation Nephilim.
This is a crucial distinction. Let's break down these two because they are the ultimate big bads of the coming apocalypse. Let's start with Ohia. The Greeks remembered him as Apollo, and the Book of Revelation calls him Apollyon. He's the crown prince of the Nephilim.
Ohia is the violent beast currently bound in the abyss. He is the prophesied king of the demon locust army. What's incredible is the lore connects him to the post-flood era. He is the disembodied entity who possessed the human king Nimrod to build the Tower of Babel. He is pure, conquering violence.
And then you have his cousin, Azazel. Azazel is the false prophet. He's known as the divine smith, the son of the Watcher Gadriel. While Ohia is locked in the abyss, Azazel is bound in the separate, specialized prison called Dudail. And in Kerman Gild's lore, Dudail isn't in some ethereal dimension. It is buried deep under the ice of Antarctica.
Azazel's influence on human history is profound. Even from his prison, he is the one who originally taught humanity metallurgy, weapons craft, and even cosmetics. He essentially kickstarted the military-industrial complex and the vanity of materialism. He weaponized human nature. Together, Ohia and Azazel are working to establish the beast's final tyrannical kingdom on Earth.
It is such a massive, interconnected mythology. We have ancient sound physics, immortal Irish operators, and demonic central bankers. So what does this all mean for our protagonist, Cian, right now? Well, the scope of this war is too big for one man, even one who has lived for 2,600 years. That brings us to the supporting cast and the prophesied endgame, because Cian isn't completely alone anymore.
The narrative takes a major turn when we are introduced to Miriam Ashford, who eventually becomes his fifth wife. Miriam is a brilliant British-Israeli financial analyst.
She is incredibly fierce. When we meet her, she is already on the run from the synagogue of Satan. Her mother, Victoria, was a high-level executive who accidentally discovered the horrific truth about her employers, the demonic reality of the 13 houses. Victoria sacrificed her own life to break a ritual chain that was meant to claim Miriam.
Because of that sacrifice, Miriam possesses a flash drive of files that could systematically dismantle the financial empire of the harlot system. She fights with knives, she's hyper-vigilant, and she trusts no one.
But the tragedy of her character is profound. The lore draws a beautiful, direct parallel between Miriam's life and the ancient biblical Book of Tobit.
In the Book of Tobit, there is a woman named Sarah who is plagued by a demon of Asmodeus. This demon is obsessively jealous and brutally kills her 7 husbands on their wedding nights, right up until an angel named Raphael intervenes. Miriam is under a modern version of that exact same curse.
Because her mother violently interrupted that dark ritual, an Asmodeus-level demon became attached to Miriam. It can't possess her, but it acts as a lethal shadow. It brutally kills any man who tries to help her, love her, or protect her.
Which is why she has been running utterly alone for 20 years. She knows that getting close to anyone is a death sentence for them. That is, until she crosses paths with Cian, a man who is uniquely equipped to survive an Asmodeus-level threat. But what she doesn't know, and what Cian doesn't fully grasp the magnitude of for a long time, is that Cian's unseen guardian angel is a specific countermeasure to this curse.
I love this part of the lore. Cian's guardian angel is named Leah, which is the Irish word for healer. But Leah is actually a cover name. It is the archangel Raphael himself.
The dynamic between Cian and Raphael is one of the best parts of the source material. Raphael communicates directly into Cian's mind, but he speaks exclusively in an archaic, all-caps imperial register. He always uses thee and thou and thine.
He sounds exactly like a thunderous King James Bible with a terrible attitude. He and Cian argue constantly, like 2 old soldiers who have been stuck in the same trench for centuries. But as powerful as Raphael is, he is severely restricted by celestial law.
Yes, Raphael's character is defined by what is known as the ban. This is an inviolable rule of engagement set by the Creator. Raphael cannot intervene against mortal humans, no matter how evil they are. He can only provide intelligence and direct physical protection against supernatural threats.
It forces Cian to do the dirty work. Cian has to operate in a highly reactive, response-based model. If a human mercenary shoots at Cian, Raphael can't stop the bullet. But if a demon steps into the room, the gloves come off.
And when Raphael does intervene, it is awe-inspiring. We talked earlier about the anti-singularity event in Brennan's lab when the Mars steels start broadcasting the entropy frequency. In that moment, the lab is being unmade.
The humans are completely helpless against that physics. But Raphael physically manifests. He steps into the void, and he literally exhausts his own celestial framework, draining his divine energy completely to hold back the anti-creation void and protect the humans in the room. He sacrifices his own connection to the heavenly liturgy to save them. It is a staggering display of angelic power and love.
This raises an incredibly important question, though. You look at the scale of this war, the sacrifices, the 2,600 years of bloodshed. What is this all leading to? Cian has been fighting a holding action for millennia. But Kerman Gild's lore reveals a tragic, locked endgame.
The prophecy. This part just breaks my heart every time I review the notes. Huygens' ultimate fate is not a mystery to the universe. It is a locked historical inevitability.
According to the overarching theology of the series, Cian Morna is the prophesied guardian of the 2 witnesses mentioned in Revelation 11. These 2 witnesses are the patriarch Enoch, the man who forged his sword, and the prophet Elijah, who have both been sustained alive in Eden for thousands of years.
When the final 12,260-day tribulation begins, Enoch and Elijah will return to minister in Jerusalem. And Cian's entire 2,600-year existence has been a training ground for those specific 12,260 days. He will stand guard over them. He will fight the forces of the synagogue of Satan.
But he will not survive. The text dictates that when Oyaya, the beast, rises from the abyss, Cian will fall protecting the bodies of the two witnesses. He will die in the streets of Jerusalem. He will not see the immediate victory. His only promise is that he will rise at the last trump.
What makes it truly profound and so incredibly sad is the isolation of that destiny. Both the Archangel Raphael and the sentient sword Chrá know exactly how his story ends. They share this knowledge through their harmonic resonance.
But because of strict celestial laws regarding free will and prophecy, neither the angel nor the sword has ever told Cian how his story ends, and neither of them ever will. He marches toward his own brutal death, doing his duty every single day, completely oblivious to his ultimate prophetic significance.
He thinks he's just a stubborn Irish soldier doing a dirty job that no one else can do.
Yeah.
He doesn't realize he is literally the tactical linchpin of the apocalypse. Okay, we have covered a massive, monumental amount of ground today. We have gone from the ancient, dusty, blood-soaked plains of Cydonia on Mars, looking at 5,000-year-old acoustic hard drives, to a high-tech 21st-century safe house in Austin, Texas. We've completely blurred the lines between quantum acoustics, modern military hardware, and ancient biblical prophecy.
The overarching takeaway from Kerman Gild's work is incredibly potent. When you strip away the tactical gear and the monsters, it is a profound commentary on knowledge. It suggests that forbidden knowledge, like the frequencies of creation or the atomic manipulation of matter, is profoundly dangerous when it is stripped of its divine moral context. It posits that the ultimate war for the soul of humanity isn't fought with magic spells or political debates. It is fought with the very frequencies of creation itself.
It makes you look at the world differently. I highly encourage all of you listening to go to Kerman Gild's website and dive into the extended lore, and definitely pick up the Cydonia Oaths. It will completely change the way you look at mythology, theology, and even the rocks you walk on. Because I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. If the core premise of this universe is true, if stone truly have memory, if the iron and the obsidian and the quartz around us are constantly recording the vibrations of human history, every triumph, every spoken word, and every atrocity, what is our modern world writing into the rocks beneath our feet right now? With all our noise, our endless wars, our digital echo chambers, and our technology, what frequencies are we permanently leaving behind for the future to decode? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, keep listening to the frequencies, and we will catch you next time.